Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, look at the headlines. Donald Trump makes his first move as US President-elect, Republican National Committee chairman to serve in the influential position of White House Chief of Staff. Stephen Bannon named as Trump's chief strategist. Japanese Prime Minister meets US President-elect in New York. Shinzo Abe says Japan can have confidence in Donald Trump. Photographs show Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner present for President-elect's first meeting with a foreign leader. Indonesia's police named Jakarta as Christian governor, a suspect in a blasphemy investigation. Developments are being seen by some as a test of Indonesia's commitment to religious tolerance and pluralism. India and Israel agreed to intensify counter-terror efforts to deal with constant security threats posed by terrorism. Both sides also sign agreements to firm up cooperation on agriculture and water resource management. While making his first move as US President-elect, Donald Trump named his chief of staff and his chief strategist, two key roles awarded to close aides who led the billionaire tycoon to a historic victory over Hillary Clinton. Trump, who will be sworn in as the 45th President of the United States on January 20th, made the announcement earlier this week, which will set the tone for the new White House.
US President-elect Donald Trump on Sunday chose Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus, the favorite of the party's establishment and a low-key Washington insider, to serve the influential position of White House Chief of Staff. In a statement, President-elect Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I'm thrilled to have my very successful team continue with me in leading our country. Steve and Reince are highly qualified leaders who worked well together in our campaign and led us to a historic victory. Now I will have them both with me in the White House." The choice of Priebus, a loyal campaign ally to Trump, who has close ties with the House of Representatives Speaker Paul Ryan, signaled a willingness to work with Ryan and the Republican-led Congress to get his agenda passed. The other frontrunner for the job has been Stephen Bannon, Trump's campaign chairman and former head of the conservative Breitbart News. Trump named Bannon as his chief strategist and senior counselor. Meanwhile, Chinese state media said President Xi Jinping told US President-elect Donald Trump in a phone call on Monday that cooperation was the only choice for relations between the two countries.
President Xi had a phone conversation with US President-elect Trump. Xi said, since China and the United States established diplomatic relations 37 years ago, the two countries' relationship has constantly been moving forward. The facts prove that cooperation is the only correct choice for China and the United States. The two sides must strengthen coordination, promote the two countries' economic development and global economic growth.
Trump had lambasted China throughout the US election campaign, drumming up headlines with his pledges to slap 45% tariffs on imported Chinese goods and to label the country a currency manipulator on his first day in office. His election has injected uncertainty into bilateral relations at a time when Beijing hopes for stability as it faces daunting reform challenges at home and a slowing economy. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is Pramit Chaudhuri, consulting editor of the Hindustan Times. Welcome and thank you for joining me on the program. You know, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he's had a very busy week. He appointed a chief of staff and a chief strategist. He had a phone call with Xi Jinping of China. He also had the first bilateral. We'll talk about that a little while later. Right. But as far as this appointment is concerned, has it set the tone for the White House?
Yes, I think there are a number of elements to this that clearly show that Trump will continue partly what he campaigned on, but partly what he has shown as a businessman that he did when he was running his own companies. Once, by setting up Priebus and Bannon as effectively two centers of power in the White House, a chief strategist and a chief of staff, which is relatively unusual, he replicates what he has done in the past as a corporate boss, which is to set up two subordinates and put them both in charge underneath him and allow effectively the two to vie with each other and allow the final decision making to go to himself. That's a very Trump way of handling things. Second, by choosing Priebus, he has chosen a person who's very much a mainstream Republican Party man, one who will have to work, who he hopes, I presume, will work with the US Congress, the congressional leaders who are relatively hostile to Trump, or were before he was elected.
He is close to Paul Ryan, isn't he?
Exactly. And so Priebus is very much a party man, much more than a Trump man. He's very much a Republican at the core of his being. So he will act, I presume, as the liaison between the president and the Congress, and his job will be to bring the Congress on board on specific legislation. Bannon, I think, is more closer to, Trump has been very clear that he is very conscious that he won the election on the basis of this white working class anger. So he wants to make sure that this group, he keeps a certain foothold with them, that he keeps people who are close to that, keep a pulse on that specific constituency, which led him to victory. And Bannon is very much part of that. He's accused of being a white supremacist at times. He's been accused of being an anti-Semite. I don't know if he's exactly that extreme, but he's definitely not a liberal in any sense of the word, and he's somewhat more extreme and nativist in his thinking than most other Republicans are. So that way you can see Trump has set a tone politically, as well as I said, created a double two double power centers. The other thing, of course, he's now also appointed his national security advisor.
Yes, three positions filled yesterday, or at least named three people, and all three of them very close aides of Donald Trump, and they were one of the first few supporters of Donald Trump initially.
Correct, yes. And it's interesting, some of them, the Attorney General, whose name now escapes me, and so again, the two points here I would point out. One, the National Security Advisor, who is something that we would be most interested in, General Michael Flynn.
Yes.
Now, Flynn is interesting. He is a former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He served in military for over 30 years. So he's very much part of the establishment structure. But on a number of points, he had differences with the Obama administration. He was removed partly because he had battles with the Obama administration on the nature of Islamic terror. He's very much part of the school of thinking, who also represented by people like Rudy Giuliani, who may be Secretary of State. That Islam.
Nikki Haley's name has also been.
Has also been a number of names now on
Yes.
Secretary of State. So we'll see who Trump eventually chooses. So he's got a core group within his own foreign policy team who are very clear that Islamic terror is their number one concern.
Yes.
So Walid Fares, Giuliani, and Michael Flynn have been very clear on that. Flynn has been driven by a concern about the Islamic State more than anything else. He has called for a new relationship with Russia as a common front, form a common front against the Islamic State. So Flynn represents very much this school of thinking, which I think again represents both Trump's sentiment, but more importantly, his constituents are of the belief that Islam is their number one threat to both the United States internally as well as externally.
Indeed.
And so by choosing Flynn, he's been very clear that national security, and I think in this case is going to be a lot of homeland security, is going to be about fighting terrorism. And Flynn is good for us to some extent. We, India, obviously have a common interest on the terrorism front. And Flynn has worked in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and with Pakistan, and is very clear in his mind. This is a man who already knows what the Haqqani network is about.
Indeed.
He knows what the ISI is about. He knows what Lashkar-e-Taiba is. So you don't have to brief him. He knows already how this entire operation is and how it's based out of Pakistan. So that way will be good for us.
Indeed. Trump has been extremely busy this week. Like I mentioned earlier, he met Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who described Donald Trump as a trustworthy leader after meeting the US President-elect on Thursday to get clarity on statements Trump had made while campaigning that had caused concern about the alliance. Abe became the first world leader to meet US President-elect Donald Trump. Here's more. Japan, one of the US's closest allies, allowed itself a cautious sigh of relief after its Prime Minister Shinzo Abe described Donald Trump as someone in whom he had great confidence after they met in New York on Thursday. Abe, the first foreign leader to meet the president-elect, said he had come away from their 90-minute meeting confident that he could trust Trump despite the property billionaire's campaign criticism of Japan's contribution to bilateral security ties.
Donald Trump was kind enough to find time today despite his extremely busy schedule while choosing his cabinet to meet with him. I believe we were able to spend substantial time together and the atmosphere of the meeting was a very warm one.
Trump, in a brief entry on his Facebook page, accompanied by a photo of the two men, said, "It was a pleasure to have Prime Minister Shinzo Abe stop by my home and begin a great friendship." Photographs taken inside the ornate meeting room at Trump Tower showed Abe accompanied only by an interpreter and Trump by his daughter Ivanka, her husband and Trump advisor Jared Kushner, and retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. While neither side revealed details of the discussions, Abe told reporters at Trump Tower in Manhattan that they were able to have a very candid talk over a substantial amount of time and in a very warm atmosphere.
I'm not going to dive into details of our discussion. I do believe that without trust, the alliance will never function. As an outcome of today's discussion, I am convinced that Trump is a leader who can be trusted.
During his presidential campaign, Trump set alarm bells ringing in Japan and South Korea after suggesting those countries were not paying enough towards their own security. Trump hinted that the US could disengage militarily from the increasingly tense Asia-Pacific region by pulling tens of thousands of troops out of Japan and South Korea. Abe's upbeat assessment of Thursday's meeting will have reassured officials in Japan, although he refused to say if he had secured specific promises from Trump on Japan's security. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television. Pramit Chaudhuri is still with me on the program. Pramit, as far as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's meeting with Trump is concerned, there were initial jitters when Donald Trump won the election on November 8th. Do you believe that after this meeting, those jitters have settled down a little bit now?
Yeah, I think what Trump has probably, I would presume Abe has told him, is that Trump has been critical of Japan, as he mentioned, even said Japan should go nuclear in terms of weapons. If need be. Trump has been consistent. In fact, over 30 years, he has said that America's allies need to share the burden of the defense of the world, and America basically is overstretched. And I think Abe will say yes, and I don't disagree, because Abe himself wants to remilitarize Japan. He's moving to change Article 9 in the Constitution, which forced Japan to be a pacifist nation. He has increased defense expenditure. He has expanded the Navy. He's developing a fifth-generation fighter. All of these fronts, you have a situation where a prime minister of Japan wants to do more. He wants to have autonomous strategic capacity. In many ways, that fits in perfectly with what Trump basically is calling for. So I'm not surprised. I think that they had a good meeting. Because Abe could basically say that is my agenda. The larger issue, which we are yet unclear about, is what Trump's policy to China will be. He has been very critical of China on the campaign trail on trade issues, but he has never said very much on the strategic side. There's nothing about the South China Sea and so on. My friends in the Republican Party tell me that there's an article by a man called Peter Navarro in Foreign Policy, which they said should be read by everybody, because in many ways they said Navarro has been Trump's campaign advisor on China policy. And then Navarro basically argues that the Obama policy towards China was to use a Trans-Pacific Partnership, this big multilateral free trade agreement, to force China down a certain economic direction and contain Chinese influence that way, while reducing America's overextended military, that America is spending way too much money on its military, which is one of Obama's theme. So they've allowed the U.S. Navy to shrink under Obama to its smallest size virtually since World War II. The Navarro argument, he says that Trump's policy was almost exact opposite. It will dump the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is probably now dead in the water as far as Trump is concerned, and will not use trade, but it will go back to using the military to contain China. And Navarro says that Trump wants the U.S. Navy to go from about 250 ships, present size, to over 350, if not more. And most of this will be deployed against China. Again, this will be music to Abe's ears if this is exactly what Trump told him.
Yes, all right. We'll have to leave it at that. Pramit, thank you so much for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us. On that note, it's time for a short break now. Still to come, Jakarta's Christian Governor Basuki Purnama in blasphemy row. Muslim groups want him prosecuted for allegedly insulting the Quran. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Israeli President Reuven Rivlin in the national capital on Tuesday. Both countries issued joint statements focusing on enhancing agricultural productivity and water resources management. India and Israel also emphasized the need for greater cultural and tourism ties. Here's more.
India and Israel inked agreements in the field of water resources management and agriculture following delegation-level talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and visiting Israeli President Reuven Rivlin. The two countries also agreed to deepen their cooperation in trade and investment and cybercrime.
Our engagement is multi-dimensional and wider-ranging. We are partnering in enhancing agricultural productivity and efficiency, boosting research and innovation, forging strong trade links and investment ties.
Flagging off terrorism as a global problem, Prime Minister Modi once again launched a veiled attack on Pakistan, saying one country in the neighborhood was spreading terror to other countries. Affirming support to India on counter-terrorism, Israeli President said both nations are threatened because they uphold the values of freedom. Prime Minister Modi also thanked Israel for its clear support to India's permanent candidature in a reformed UN Security Council.
We recognize that terrorism is a global challenge, knows no boundaries, has extensive links with other forms of organized crime. Regrettably, one of the countries of its origin and spread is in India's neighborhood. We agreed that the international community must act with resolve and determination against terror networks and states that harbor them.
Mr. Prime Minister, on my visit, I will also pay my respect at the sites of terror attacks which claimed the lives of both of our peoples. Israel and India are threatened by terror because we uphold the values of freedom.
During his ongoing 8-day visit, the Israeli president also visited Mumbai to participate in a memorial ceremony for the 26/11 terror attack victims. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The Christian governor of Jakarta, the capital of the world's largest Muslim-majority nation, has been named a suspect in a case of alleged blasphemy. The case involving Basuki Purnama has caused uproar across the country in recent weeks and is being seen by some as a test of Indonesia's commitment to religious tolerance and pluralism. Here's a report. Indonesian National Police on Wednesday named the Christian and ethnic Chinese governor of Jakarta a suspect in an alleged blasphemy case brought against him by Muslim groups. The complaint against Basuki Tahaja Purnama, nicknamed Ahok, and the first ethnic Chinese and Christian governor of the sprawling Indonesian capital comes as President Joko Widodo tries to keep a lid on security and simmering religious tensions in the world's biggest Muslim-majority nation.
Meskipun tidak bulat.
The dominant opinion is that this case should be settled in court. The next phase of investigation will be intensified. By naming Basuki as a suspect, he is not allowed to leave Indonesia.
Konsekuensinya,
The blasphemy allegations center on a speech Purnama made in September in which he said his opponents had deceived voters by attacking him using a verse from the Quran. Purnama has apologized for the comments, but hardline Muslim groups have demanded that he resign, claiming that he insulted the holy book. The police chief urged calm among the people and asked them to accept the result that would be delivered by the court later. They also recommended that the case be tried in an open court.
Tapi kita juga mensinyalir adanya
We have to bring this case to court and trial it in open. I believe that the people will witness the legal process, accept and respect the final conclusion.
yang lain. Agenda-agenda
More than 100,000 Muslims marched against Purnama this month, urging voters not to re-elect him in February.
Bagi saya ini di pengadilan bukan.
I believe everyone is equal and can be prosecuted. I thank the police for prosecuting the case. I will accept being a suspect and will follow the legal procedures. I think this is a good example of democracy.
Sama di muka hukum.
Purnama, a Protestant, once hugely popular for his tough reformist approach to running the city of 10 million, has seen his support plummet amid the controversy. A decision to drop the case could have sparked mass protests led by hardline Muslims against not just Purnama but also Widodo, who is seen as a key backer of the governor. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television. Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a roundup of the international news of the week in Globe Watch.
The US has said Pakistan can and must take more effective action against terror groups operating from its soil, as no state should allow its territory to be used to launch attacks into another. According to the White House, President Barack Obama has emphasized that Pakistan can and must also take more effective action against terrorist groups. He made the comment in response to an online petition that was signed by a record almost 666,000 people. The petition asked the Obama administration to declare Pakistan a state sponsor of terrorism, as desired by a bill introduced in the US House of Representatives by two congressmen, Ted Poe and Dana Rohrabacher. Almost 40 people have been killed in intense fighting between rebels and loyalists in the outskirts of Taiz in Yemen. The clashes have eliminated hope of the warring parties abiding by a truce announced by US Secretary of State John Kerry that was to have taken effect on Thursday. Loyalist military sources said 24 rebels and 14 pro-government forces were killed in the last 24 hours, while the rebels reported dozens of casualties in shelling of a local market. 2 civilians were also killed and 16 wounded when rebels fired rockets into the residential area of Taiz. The World Health Organization declared the mosquito-borne Zika virus will no longer be treated as an international medical emergency. By lifting its 9-month-old declaration, the UN's health agency is acknowledging that Zika is here to stay. The infection has been linked to severe birth defects in almost 30 countries. These include microcephaly, where babies are born with abnormally small heads and restricted brain development. The WHO says more than 2,100 cases of nervous system malformations have been reported in Brazil alone. Sweden's chief prosecutor questioned WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange about a rape allegation at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Swedish prosecutor Ingrid Isgren listened as an Ecuadorian prosecutor put the questions to Assange. Assange is accused of raping a woman named in legal papers as SW at her home in August 2010. However, Assange denies the charges and believes the allegations are politically motivated. Swedish prosecutors dropped part of their investigation last year because of a statute of limitations. China mourns the death of Yu Shu, the country's first female jet and jet pilot, who was killed during an aerobatic training session last week. Yu was hit by the wing of another aircraft after ejecting from her plane. The domestically made jet crashed into a field in Tangshan. According to reports, Yu was forced to eject from her plane after it collided with another, while another pilot survived the crash. He is said to have been her co-pilot and has already been discharged from the hospital. The black box and the engine of the aircraft have been retrieved and an investigation is underway.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news you might have missed this week in Sports Action. Tim Duncan, who played almost 2 decades with the same team and captured 5 NBA titles, will have his number 21 jersey retired by the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs said the ceremony would take place on the 18th of December when San Antonio hosts the New Orleans Pelicans. Duncan will become the 8th Spurs player in franchise history to have his number raised to the rafters. Duncan finished his career in San Antonio as one of just 3 players in NBA history, along with John Stockton of the Utah Jazz and Kobe Bryant of Los Angeles Lakers, to spend 19 seasons with one franchise. AB de Villiers' job as South African captain is safe despite Faf du Plessis impressing with his leadership as stand-in skipper during the thumping back-to-back test wins over Australia. Star batsman de Villiers was ruled out of the series with a left elbow injury that required surgery, with du Plessis seamlessly taking over. His vision has been praised in steering the team to an unassailable 2-0 lead. A win in the final day-night test in Adelaide next week will consign Australia to their first home series whitewash in history. Despite this, selectors are not considering promoting du Plessis to do the job full-time. Jose Mourinho was fined by the Football Association for pre-match comments about Anthony Taylor after his remarks were found to have brought an additional layer of pressure upon the referee. Manchester United manager Mourinho spoke about Taylor ahead of last month's goalless draw away to arch-rivals Liverpool in the Premier League. Taylor's suitability to take charge of the game was widely questioned in the build-up, mainly on account of the fact that he lives in Alton Camp near Manchester. Barcelona president Josep Maria Bartomeu is convinced Lionel Messi will end his career at the club. The 4-time Ballon d'Or winner, whose current deal expires in the summer of 2018, is yet to agree new terms. Bartomeu said all of Barcelona believe this is how it has to be because he is the player that in the last few years has brought them sporting success. He was speaking at the announcement of a new shirt deal with Japanese retailer Rakuten that could rise to over $200 million. With add-ons, the deal could become the highest in football sponsorship history. Ron Dennis confirmed on Tuesday he has quit as boss of Formula One outfit McLaren after 35 years following pressure from shareholders. The 69-year-old, who helped guide the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Ayrton Senna to world titles, quit after shareholders demanded at a meeting on Tuesday that he step down as chairman and chief executive. Dennis has a 25% stake in McLaren, whilst Bahrain's Mumtalakat investment fund owns 50% and the remaining 25% is held by his longtime business partner Mansour Oje, a Saudi-born Frenchman. Finally, the holiday season officially kicked off at Macy's flagship department store in New York City on Friday with the unveiling of the store's window displays. The theme for this year's holiday windows is Believing the Magic. An estimated 15,000 people will walk by the iconic window displays every hour during the holiday season. I'm going to leave you with these visuals. See you again next time.